Hey everybody, today is Saturday, December 2nd, 2023. Ghost car door. Anyway, today is, again, Saturday, December 2nd, 2023, and we are here in Thurmond, North Carolina, maybe State Road, North Carolina. That's what the actual address says, State Road, North Carolina, but I don't know if that's actually a town. We're right outside of Elkin, North Carolina. Elkin's only maybe a mile or so in that direction. So maybe I'll just say we're in Elkin, North Carolina. If you know exactly, leave your comments down below. But the reason why we are out here today is because, again, I did lock my van, right? Pretty sure I did. Well, now I did again. The reason why we are here today is because I am heading down once again to Florida. Just slept at the rest area, maybe, 20 or so minutes down the road at the Welcome Center. Just got into North Carolina about 2 a.m. That southern drawl is coming out now that I'm in the South. I just got to North Carolina at 2 a.m. last night, slept at the rest area last night, and did some research on what was in the area. And this came up. We are at the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, and the reason why I wanted to bring you guys out here today is to show you something pretty interesting, and I wanted to see this with my own eyes as well, because this is rather interesting. I love weird, bizarre stories like this, and this is kind of a weird, bizarre story that I can definitely appreciate. On top of it, the churches, they are quite beautiful. This is really, really awesome. Again, the Mount Pleasant, this grass is very, very wet. The Mount Pleasant Baptist Church here in, we'll just say Elkin, North Carolina. Look at that. Not one, not two, but 3 churches. And that right there is what makes this whole thing very, very interesting. And the reason why I wanted to stop out here and see this with my own eyes, because the story behind why there's 3 churches here is pretty awesome. Again, very interesting to see them grow from a tiny church to a slightly bigger church to a rather large church right here. Like I said, the story behind why there are 3 churches here is first time talking today, is an interesting one. So the story goes, and I don't think it's actually a story, it's the truth, it's the actual history, though I did try to look up the history of these churches, and oh my gosh, my feet are getting so wet walking in this grass. The history of the church, I tried looking up, and the only real history I could find was on who were the ministers and things like that. Couldn't actually find too much information on when the churches were specifically built. So I'm hoping for some maybe cornerstones or something like that to help us out. But the story, the actual history of these churches is this one here was the first church that was built on property. Again, I'm hoping we can find maybe possibly a cornerstone or something telling us, again, just woke up, telling us when this building was built, but I don't actually see cornerstone anywhere on this building. This is pretty awesome. Look at the spider web there. Anyway, so I'm not seeing a cornerstone on this church right here, but this was the first church built on property. But over time, the congregation grew, the church got bigger, more and more people started to show up at the church, and they eventually outgrew this small church right here, and a new church needed to be built. So what happens a lot of the times when that's the case, either A, they'll just tear down the old church and build a new church on top of it, or sometimes B, they build up and around the old church. I've seen that many a times where you can kind of see there was an old church where they built on top of it or expanded it out or something like that. But what they did here is they just kept this church going. They kept people coming into this church. They kept services going here as they built the new church next to the old church. And when this church was done being built, they just started doing their services inside this church here. And instead of tearing this one down, instead of taking this church and getting rid of it, they just use it as an auxiliary room, which I think is a brilliant idea. No need to tear down the old building, just use it for other purposes. You have a perfectly good building that there's no issues with. It's not falling down. It's in perfectly good condition. That's where your church used to be, but you just built a brand new, much larger church for your larger congregation. But just use the old church as an auxiliary room or something. Now hold your sermons inside this much larger, very beautiful church. I love the columns. I love the steeple. That bell steeple is pretty awesome. This is a beautiful looking church. And I do believe I see a cornerstone on this church telling us when this one was built. There's something right over here. This says, let's see if we can read this. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, organized 1886, rebuilt in 1961. So I'm thinking that means this building right here was built in 1961. I don't think that was built in 1886. I don't think that building was built in 1886. From what I could read online, I think this was built maybe like the early 1900s. From what I could see online, again, couldn't find the information I was hoping to find on the church, but pretty awesome. So again, church services being held in this building right here. Congregation grew, needed to have a much larger church for their services, so they built this one right here. However, the church was still continuing to grow, so in time, they outgrew this one as well. So eventually, when they did outgrow this church, what did they do? Did they tear down that church and this church and build a much larger church on property? Did they tear down this newer church or just the older church to build a newer church? No, they kept this one up as the auxiliary room. They kept services going inside this church as they were building their third and final church right here, the largest church of them all. And then eventually, when this church was built, they started holding services in here and just kept both of these rooms as auxiliary rooms. You can see they're all attached together. From the newer church, there is a walkway into this church right here. And then from the second church, there is a breezeway, a walkway that leads into the first original church. So you can go from one church to the others, which is really, really interesting. I'm hoping maybe there's a cornerstone on this church here. See, I don't know the actual history or the dates. If you guys do, maybe you go to this church. You guys can leave comments down below. But I don't know if this church was the one that was built in 1960. Was it 1961? I'm not sure if this church here was built in 1961, or maybe that marker there is for the rebuilding of this church as well. Again, I don't actually know what the dates are on any of these churches. This one here, though, has some really beautiful stained glass windows. Actually, they both do. Look at this. I love stained glass windows on churches. Look at that. That is pretty awesome. And just the design of these churches are pretty awesome. I love the columns. They're so cool looking. And again, the very large steeple. Like I said, don't know history of these churches perfectly. I don't really see a cornerstone on this church here, so I'm not sure of the actual date that this church was built. Maybe this is the one that was built in 1961. I do not know. No, wait, hold on. I think I may have just found a cornerstone over here in the entranceway. Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, dedicated to the glory of God, October 3rd, there we go, 1999. My house shall be called the house of prayer. Matthew 2113. So there you go. This church right here, not built all that long ago, 1999. So 1999, 1961. And then I'm not entirely sure about the first one over there. Obviously built before 1961, possibly early 1900s, maybe possibly from what I was seeing online. Again, could not find the exact information, but look at that. How cool is this? How often do you see something like this? The original church, the newer church, and the newest church side by side. Instead of tearing the old churches down, they just kept building churches next to one another as they needed to grow, as they needed to expand, and then just use the older churches as auxiliary rooms. Brilliant idea. I love that. And it makes for a really interesting looking church. As you drive down the road, you see these three churches growing in size, which I think is just really, really awesome. So I had to stop out here, had to see this with my own eyes. The story and just the look of this was too interesting not to stop out here and see this. I was hoping maybe that the sign out front would say exactly where we are. You would think that since it is the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church that we were maybe possibly in Mount Pleasant, North Carolina, but from what I could see online, that is not the case. Multiple different names of where we are right now came up when searching to find out where exactly we are right now. Mount Pleasant was not one of the suggestions anywhere that came up. I was hoping maybe it would say, Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, Elkin, North Carolina, but it just says Reverend Dylan Cook as the pastor. But look at that right there. That is such a cool shot. With all three differently sized churches, they're upgrading. That is just so unique and so interesting. I want to try to step back as far as I can to get a good shot of all three churches. My only concern is this is definitely some kind of like drainage ditch, and it clearly has been raining because my shoes are soaked, and I'm a little nervous about walking through here. Okay, so made it through the sort of retention pond kind of area without getting any more wet than my shoes already have been. And look at that. Totally worth it for that shot right there alone of all three churches side by side. What an interesting view. This is just one church. That is so cool looking. I commend this church for doing this. It is so unique. I have never seen anything like this before. I have seen one old church sort of next to a newer church. I've seen that before, where the old church is kind of off to the side. Maybe it's an old wooden church from like the 1800s, and they outgrew that a long, long time ago, but it was historical, so they kept it up. And then up on the hill is the huge, gigantic mega church that they're using now. I've seen that before, where again, the old historical wooden church or whatever is still on property and still maintained because it is a historical church. But I've never seen one where it's literally church next to a church next to a church just like this. It's such a weird, interesting, bizarre, and awesome design. I love it. And the fact that they're all connected to one another. You can get from the new 1999 church into the 1961 church, and then into the early 1900s church as well. That is pretty cool. What an awesome, interesting shot. Yeah, I had to get out here. I had to check this out. As soon as I found out that something like this existed, I just wanted to see it with my own eyes, because I love the weird and the bizarre. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not trying to say, oh, this is weird, church. Why did you do this? I mean, it's just weird because you never see something like this. It's bizarre because you never see something like this. But today we are seeing something like this, and I think it's so cool. So if you know of any other churches like this, leave your comments down below. Again, I've seen one old church next to a newer church, but I've never seen three churches like this. And I've never seen them literally side by side like this and all connected to one another like this before. That is something new that I've never seen before. If you have, leave your comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. But how to pull over off the highway. I had to check this out. Okay, so now that my shoes are thoroughly soaked through, worth it, totally worth walking through the wet North Carolina grass here to see the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, or should I say Mount Pleasant Baptist churches. Pretty awesome to see them upgrade, if you will, from a small church to a little bit larger church to this rather large, impressive church right here. As their congregation continued to grow, new churches needed to be built. They had the land to do that on. Again, they could have just torn down the old church, built a new church on top of it, but they did not. They kept all the churches going. They used the old churches as now auxiliary rooms and halls and stuff like that. Pretty awesome to see them do something like this. And who knows, maybe one day, possibly, maybe, the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church will outgrow this church and we'll have to build one over there where the house is, the pastor's house. I don't know who lives there, but maybe, who knows, maybe someday that house will get torn down for an even larger church to be built. And there won't be just one church, not two churches, not three churches, but maybe someday 4 churches on this property. If that ever happens, you better believe I'm coming back out here to see that, because 3 churches is already interesting enough. 4 churches would be crazy. And if you know where anything like that exists, if you know where there is somewhere that there's 3 churches or even 4 churches, especially 4 churches, leave your comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. But again, this is too cool. Wanted to get out here, wanted to see this with my own eyes, document this for you guys, show you something that's pretty just different. I love things that are just different. And I would have to say that 3 churches side by side, churches that were outgrown, just side by side by side, is definitely unique, interesting, bizarre, and incredibly awesome, and totally worth pulling over to take a look at. Before we leave, just to further document the property, I wanted to walk down these stairs right here and to check out what's down here, because it looks like they actually have a barbecue pit. I mean, it's North Carolina. If they did not have a barbecue pit, that would just be weird, right? A church in North Carolina has to have a barbecue pit. So it looks like a barbecue pit, little picnic area. And is that a really old water fountain, an old drinking fountain? I have no idea what this is right here. That is interesting. I love the stonework on this. I don't know what this is or what it used to be. Maybe it was a drinking fountain at one point. It's got a spigot that does nothing. That is interesting. I have no idea what that is or what that used to be. I want to say maybe an old drinking fountain at one point. There's a basketball court here with a full court and a half court on it. Pretty awesome looking playground, some swings, and a cemetery that sits right next to the church as well. So pretty awesome property. I could see this being a pretty cool church to be a member of. Not only do you have the epicness of look at that, you can see the 3 spires there, all side by side. Not only do you have the epicness of the 3 growing churches side by side, but you have a barbecue pit, a place to picnic, a place to play basketball. You can bring your kids out here to play on the playground. I gotta say, this is a pretty awesome church. If I lived in the area and I was going to be going to a Baptist church, I used to work for the American Baptist churches for 14 years actually. But if I was going to go to a church in the area, a Baptist church in the area, ooh, echo, this right here is the one I would definitely go to. Okay, so this is pretty awesome. As I was out there filming, I was stopped by a member of the church, and I was able to come inside to see something really, really neat. So kind of got the information wrong. The information online is a little bit misleading. The small church that's all the way down at the very end is actually not a church. That's an education center. This right here was the original 1800s wooden church that sat on the back of the property, back out where the cemetery is. And a member, Daryl Vernon, built this to show off what the original church on property looked like. Look at the detail of this, the old wooden floors and the pulpit back there. That is amazing. So this was the original church that sat on property. It was a church that was used until 1961 when the middle church, which is actually the second church, that church was built. And then that one was used until 1999 when the church we're in right now was built to be used. So there you go. That is too cool. This is an awesome, beautiful model. That is pretty neat. Okay, so the plot thickens. So the church was founded in 1886, but the original little church there was built in 1905, and this is the original pulpit. So the pulpit that you see in here, right back there, this right here is the original pulpit that sat in that church. That is pretty cool to see. The fact that they saved that and it still remains, you can still come out here and see this. That is really neat. So when we were outside, I showed you those little kind of hallways that went from one church to the other. We're actually standing in one of those right now, and they have some history here. Look at the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, State Road, North Carolina. So that is, I guess, where we are. We're in State Road, North Carolina. This is the original 1905 to 1961 wooden church that used to sit on property. And then there's a really interesting map here showing you the large church, the smaller church, which is used as the children's church now, and the building 3 here, which was never used as a church. It's an educational center. That is cool. Again, just the history this church has is just, I love seeing this kind of thing. They don't need to put this in here, but they do. And that's awesome. I love seeing people just get educated. And it just keeps getting just more and more amazing. So this was the original painting that used to hang behind the pulpit in the original 1905 church. The fact that they saved this stuff is so cool. And not only did they save it, but they put it on display. That is pretty amazing. And I'm also noticing there's the old dedication shovels here. They have one there and one back there. So I'm assuming this is the one from 1961? Yeah,
yes,
1961 shovel there. And then this would be the 1999 shovel over here. Really cool to see this stuff on display for people to come out here and see and to educate people about this church. I'm so happy I got to come in here and see all this. Wow, so we are getting some pretty cool special access here. We're in a little back room now. We're actually in the 1960s church at the moment. Back there is the actual church, and the pulpit is right down behind this scrim right here. And the reason why the scrim is there is to keep the light off of this, an original 1960s painting by J.H. Click, painted in 1962. It's a scene of the Mitchell's River where the church actually used to baptize people back in the 1800s, early 1900s. They used to do all their baptizing in the Mitchell's River, and they wanted this scene painted for the church when they built it back in the 1960s. Not many people get to see this anymore. It's really cool. It sits back here still. The fact that they protect it by keeping the sun off it. They're very proud of this painting, as they should be. And again, we got special access to come back here and to see this. This is not something many people who aren't members of the church get to do. Look at that. That is beautiful. I am so privileged right now to be seeing this. That is awesome. Right now, we're in the original 1961 chapel. Look at the amazing and beautiful stained glass windows of different scenes from the Bible of Jesus there. That is beautiful. Look at those old 1960 lights. I mean, those right there are pretty awesome. And back there, behind the pulpit, that is where that painting that we got to see actually resides. But again, they have it blocked off to keep the sun off of it, to keep it from fading. Pretty cool that we get to be in inside here for so many decades. People coming out here and getting married in here and coming to sermons in here. Pretty cool that this is still here today and still being used. But I honestly I thought the stained glass windows were going to really fascinate me, but I think it's those light fixtures that I'm kind of blown away by. Oh my goodness. So that was amazing. A huge, huge thank you to Debbie Maines for letting us go inside the church and to show us all around. She showed me pretty much every square inch of this church. I got to see so much more stuff that I did not even show you guys. I was in the basements. I was in the attic. I was seeing weird, different rooms of the church. These churches are much bigger inside than they look from the outside. It's a maze inside there. The fact that she knew where she was going impressed me because I kept getting turned around. I had no idea where and what building we were inside of. It was crazy, but she gave us so much history. She gave me so much history. That was where the minister used to live. Now what they do is that's no longer the minister's home. They actually give the ministers of the church an allowance so they can put that into the actual purchasing of their homes in the area. This is now used for people who have been burnt out of homes. So if there's a fire in the area and a family loses their house and they need somewhere to live, they let them live inside this house right here. It's completely furnished, pots and pans, TVs, all that stuff. So if unfortunately somebody in the area, a member of the community, is burnt out of their home, they can stay here until they get a new place to live or to their new house is built. That's so amazing. So again, very awesome, very amazing to actually get to go inside here. I completely lucked out that I just happened to be here filming while there were people inside setting up for Christmas. They're about to do a Christmas play with the children of the church, and they were in there setting up for that. So very cool, very awesome. And I'm happy to now know the actual history of the church because, as I always say with these videos, take them with a grain of salt. I just get what information I can off the internet. And the internet was saying that this was the original church, followed by this church, then followed by this church. And that is not the case. The original church was from 1905 and sat in the very back corner of the property, back where the cemetery now is. Then this church was built in 1961. This was the second church. So this was not the first church, but this was the second church. And then it was followed in 1999 by this church. So the story of the congregation outgrowing the churches is completely true, just not so much the story online about which churches were built when. This church here, well, not church, this educational center was actually built in 1980 something or another. This was built in the 1980s, which is why it kind of looks a little bit more modern than the 1960s church. But it's really cool of them to have built it with the steeple on top. Debbie was telling me this is called the Church with Three Steeples. So pretty awesome that even though this was not a church, was never used as a church, it still looks like a church. Very interesting design. I'm so happy I now know the history of this amazing church. That was just so cool. The fact that I got to go inside and bring you guys along with me. Sometimes it pays to be in the right place at the right time. I was definitely at the right place at the right time to get to go inside and give a full grand tour of the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. All right, guys, but with that, I need to hit the road and get driving because that was a detour, a much longer detour than I had anticipated. Honestly, thought I'd be out here for maybe like 20 minutes tops, filming a video, just talking to you guys quickly about the really cool, amazing church and trying to give you guys what history I could find online about the church. I was not expecting to actually do a full grand tour of the church, which probably took about a good hour and a half, which I'm not complaining about. That was awesome. That was amazing. I will gladly take an hour and a half or so detour to do something like that. That was just too cool. But with that, I am now about an hour and a half, 2 hours or so behind schedule. And I've got to hit the road because I have a very, very long drive down to Florida. But again, so cool to be able to come out here, see this amazing church, the amazing steeples here at this church, and to actually get to go inside, be given a full grand tour, and to actually get the history of the church. But with that, we are done. So if you are a member of this church or you've ever been to this church, leave your comments down below. I want to hear from you guys. It seems like they do a lot for their community. They have a very big community base here, which I think is really, really cool. Debbie was telling me about all the things that the community has done for them and all the things that they have done for the community. Very cool. This church seems to be very involved, again, with their community and with their members, which is really, really awesome to see and awesome to hear about. But again, with that, we are done. I've got to hit the road. So as always, guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. This really, man, I can't believe we got to go inside. This really awesome video. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Check down below for links to Patreon. If you guys do become a patron, I will send you a postcard every single month from the road. Also check down below for a link to Spreadshirt, where you can grab yourself retro Rest t-shirts. Proceeds both from Spreadshirt and from Patreon do help support the show, and they keep the show going. So I really do appreciate that. Right back there, right in that kind of area over there, is where the original 1905 church used to sit. Pretty awesome. But all right, guys. So if you guys watch this video all the way until the very end, wow, what should today's hashtag be? I don't even know what we should make today's hashtag. Hashtag, let's do hashtag church detour. If you guys watch this video all the way until the very end, hashtag church detour. If you guys watch this video all the way until the very end. But all right, guys, that's going to do it. So like I said, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And if you do hit that subscribe button, or you are subscribed, then I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.